This is Dennis Ramundi. I'm here with my co-host, Phil Goldberg, author of American Veda. Our podcast, Spirit Matters, found at spiritmatterstalk.com. Our guest on the show today, Reverend Michael Bernard Beckwith, who is the founder and spiritual director of the Agape International Spiritual Center, a trans-denominational community headquartered in Los Angeles, comprised of thousands of local members and global live streamers. This November marks Agape's 30th anniversary, and I have to say, Reverend Michael, that I am not in Los Angeles, but I've had dozens and dozens of people I know say, when you come to Los Angeles next time, make sure to go to the Agape Church. It will change your life. So you were very well known to me.
Dennis, you definitely have to come. People, they make it kind of a destination point for their conferences and vacations.
Mm-hmm.
Just to come into the field. And it was last November that we celebrated our 30th anniversary, and
Wow.
coming up will be our 31st. And time flies, and I can't believe I've been doing that many years.
I promise you, I will be there.
As somebody who was at the place on Olympic before you were at your current place, time flies, doesn't it?
I can't believe it, because I'm just so into it. Day by day by day by day, the years have crept up, and I'm still the same age chronologically, biologically. I'm still a young man.
I know. Well, let's talk about that, actually, because we'd love to have our listeners hear a little bit about how you came to your work and into your ministry, and you've had, to say the least, you had a very interesting life leading up to it. And can you give us a little overview of how this all came to be?
Well, it was, a number of years ago. I don't know where to start. There's so many layers to my awakening. But I was attending USC at the time, psychobiology major, and I began to have a series of inner experiences that, because I was not consciously on the path at that time, they seemed more or less pathological. I was in the psych department at USC, and I was seeing things, hearing things, seeing visions, traveling outside of my body, and these experiences it lasted for over a year, actually, and culminated with these men in a lucid dream who had been following me on a nightly basis, by the way. Two men grabbed me, and one man plunged a knife in my heart, and that the pain physically was excruciating and emotionally was excruciating, and I died in the dream. And when I woke up, I could see that we were surrounded by this presence of such love and such beauty and such intelligence, that the beauty is beyond description, and the love penetrated every cell of my being. And the trajectory of my life changed from that moment on. I began to pursue what had happened to me, and then, of course, in that pursuit, bumped into the mystical teachings of Jesus the Christ and Paramahansa Yogananda Ji and Sri Aurobindo and a number of other spiritual teachers, and the different paths that showed many people had a similar encounter that allowed them to see differently and change their life. And I've never looked back from that particular moment, and I have the same depth of enthusiasm that I had back in the 70s today when I wake up. The same availability to what wants to emerge in me. And that's a short version of what happened. There's a lot of things going into that. But after that particular experience, and then there were subsequent experiences, of course, that have happened, but the initial one set me on the path to practice meditation regularly, affirmative prayer regularly, different spiritual technologies, and life visioning emerged as a technology that I originated a number of years ago, and I've been moving ever since, Phil.
Yeah, I know.
Reverend Michael, when you first had these visions, when you first had this spiritual awakening, your family, your friends, those around you, how did they react to it?
Well, I wasn't really talking too much about the experiences when they were happening, because I actually thought that I was losing my mind. I was my sanity was in question, and I was in the psych department, and I'm reading about pathology, and so and I'll tell you an experience. I had an internship in a mental facility, and we would go in and we would interview the patients that were locked up there, and make our reports and this type of thing. And there was a young man that I was playing ping pong with and having conversation about his life. And as I was playing ping pong with him, it finally dawned upon me that we hadn't spoken in minutes, that we were speaking telepathically.
Mm-hmm.
And he was sharing with me about this cosmic awareness he was having. And when I realized we were not speaking, I got so nervous, I put the ping pong table paddle down and checked myself out, because I realized something was going on. So back to my friends, I lost every friend that I had after this particular experience. They all thought I had freaked out. They said they thought I had freaked out on Jesus, and I was not the same. My priorities had shifted tremendously, and what I was concerned about was just the conscious connection with this presence, and what my life was to be about now that I knew this was real, because I was coming from somewhat of an agnostic or atheistic point of view. I had left the church when I was 16, didn't want to have anything else to do with it. When I attended Morehouse College, I was an atheist. It was very revolutionary. I was wanting to change society. And so when this happened, it was a sudden shift of which I was not consciously participating in, because I didn't believe in all of this. I didn't have any disbelief. I didn't have any belief. And so obviously some seeds opened up within me from some previous work I had done, you see, and flowered. And so yeah, my friends thought I was crazy. I was attending USC. I had gotten arrested for on my last deal of selling marijuana, and I won't go through that whole story, but suffice it to say that I was told inwardly that I would walk away from this scot-free, and people thought I was crazy. They thought I was going to go to jail, and I said, no, I've been told inwardly. And I went to court, and through some technicality, everything was thrown out, as if exactly the way they told me was going to happen. And when that occurred, I surrendered my life to the presence and just dedicated my entire life to growing in this ever-expanding awareness of my oneness with the presence and being of service to it.
Just to complete the circle with your history, I know your work at Agape is very independent and very eclectic, and but at a certain point you became ordained in what was then called the Church of Religious Science.
It was the United Church of Religious Science.
Yes, and
it's a denomination, and religious science is the teaching.
What drew you in those days to religious science or science of mind?
Well, I had been independently researching and going to meditation retreats and studying on my own. And my mother, who was involved in the science of mind, invited me, and a lady by the name of Alyssa Sprinkles, which is a great friend of the family, invited me to the Guidance Church of Religious Science. And I wasn't too high on going, because I can remember the churches that I went to as a kid weren't all that high on truth-telling. It was more, myths and, just dogma. So I decided to go with them, and we arrived a little bit late. I was walking down the aisle, and the minister said, I can hear it to this day, heaven and hell aren't merely places, they're states of consciousness. And I said out loud, he's right, like that. And I must have been like 22, 23 years old, and I said, he's right. And everybody looked at me, this young whippersnapper walking in there saying, he's right. And I sat down and I listened to him speak. and he was speaking about what I knew to be the truth, that this presence was within everyone, and this presence was everywhere, and that heaven and hell are states of consciousness. And the next day, I sat in front of him when he was teaching a class, and he looked at me and he asked me my name, and I told him, and he said, "Well, this is a 15-week class, and we're already at week 7. So I advise you to leave the class and to come back when we start over." And I said, "I will not. I'll complete this, and then when it begins again, I'll commence with you." And he said, "Okay, Mr. Beckwith, have it your way."
Uh-huh.
And so he was a great metaphysician, and the metaphysical teachings corroborated with the mystical teachings of the ages, and so it became a wonderful haven for a young man to take classes, to be around people who were studying this kind of material, and I continued my own study and my own meditation practices. Right. So that's what drew me in. It was his understanding of the great perennial religion.
Reverend Michael, I wanted to ask that. I'm curious. So you had these internal experiences. You were a student. You got some guidance. You got a teacher. At what point did you think to yourself, or did it naturally happen that I have to speak this out to others? I have to help others, because you've dedicated most of your life to uplifting the consciousness and the quality of life of other people. Did that come suddenly, or did you naturally evolve to the point where you thought, I have to share this with others?
Well, two things occurred. One, there was a period of time in which I was unemployed. I had worked for a city councilman for a number of years as a councilmanic aide, the director of senior citizens affairs in a district here in LA, and that tenure was up. And I remember sitting in my living room saying, "Okay, what would you have me do?" The phone rang. There was a woman on the phone. Her name was Sheila. And she said, "I saw your phone number in the high school annual. We went to high school together. And I was guided to call you. I'm going through some problems. And I was guided that you could assist me." So I began to counsel her and pray for her. She would send donations to me. And subsequently, I saw her at a restaurant probably about 4 or 5 months after this encounter. And she saw me and got nervous and left because she had revealed so many things about her that she was just speaking into the phone to this anonymous person she used to know in high school. And so I realized that I had a gift, and in the Church of Religious Science, they have an ecclesiastical office called Religious Science Practitioner. It's a spiritual therapist. And so I was already taking classes, so I continued to take classes and eventually became a spiritual therapist. And I actually did that for about 7 years. I saw 6 to 8 people every single day, 6 days a week, working with individuals one-on-one. That emerged with me doing workshops and then seminars and then guest speaking. And at the time, I thought that was enough. I liked my life. I liked what I was doing. A lot of healings happened. But I was getting guidance to start a bigger work. And at this time now, I'm the Director of Education at the World Ministry of Prayer. I'm teaching at the faculty at the university. I have my own private clientele, workshops. I thought that was enough. But the inner guidance kept saying, you're doing a good work, but it's too small. We need you to do something else. This is what was coming to me, and I resisted it for a couple of years. I didn't want to do anything else. And finally, my world that I was in shrunk. There was a lot of hostility politically where I was working, jealousy. So many things began to occur on so many levels that I was literally pushed out of that cocoon and had to start the work. I went to Puerto Vallarta on a vacation, and I had a vision. And the vision was agape. I could see it. So when I came back to the office, I told the one of the directors that I was called to start a work and that I'd be tendering my resignation after I trained my replacement. And the woman said, "Well, where are you going to start the work?" And I said, "I've been guided to start it in Santa Monica." And she said, "What about?" She said, "What about your people?" And I said, "Short people?" And she said, "Oh, I didn't mean anything by it. I didn't mean, you know." And I said, "From what I understand, we're all God's people, you know." And I'm invited to start in Santa Monica, and whoever will show up will show up. And as you know, Phil, because you were there, it became a very diverse, as it still is, very inclusive community. Everyone's there. So eventually I left that, founded Agape, and then now we're going into our 31st year.
It's amazing.
And it still carries the same rich diversity and inclusivity, probably even more now than before.
I was actually going to be my next question because, there's this old saying that the most segregated places in the country is at churches on Sunday morning. And Agape is exactly the opposite. It's one of the most diverse gatherings of human beings you'll ever see on any given Sunday. And I was going to ask if that was by design or just happened that way. And it's a beautiful thing to observe. And does that carry through to some of the dimensions of the church, like the outreach and community programs?
Course. Yeah. If you looked at our staff, the leadership, the practitioners, the diversity is there. Asians, Latinos, blacks, whites, Jews, everybody's here. Straight, gay, whatever. It's all here. And I would have to say that, one, it starts in consciousness, and my house growing up was very eclectic. My mother was very involved in the civil rights movement, and a lot of times our home was used as a place of planning things. And so my house was always filled with all kinds of different people. Jewish people, white people, black people, straight people, gay people, Mexicans. It was like so from a very young age, I grew up with this kind of inclusivity that was in my home. And so when I went to junior high and high school and I would see people saying things about people of other nationalities or other sexual orientation, that was strange to me because I didn't know that. You know what I mean? People were people as far as I was concerned. So I think in my consciousness, that was there. I don't have any, there are no monolithic races. Everybody's unique within their particular ethnicity. And I think that just who I am and then who I drew to me. It's like when I started my vision group, the vision group was made up of three different kinds of people. One, my personal clientele that used to always tell me, if you ever start something, I want to be a part of it. Two, the individuals that I was doing seminars for, very inclusive group. And three, individuals that I was actually training to be practitioners, very inclusive group. So my initial vision group from the beginning was very diverse and inclusive. So when I started Agape in my living room, everybody was already in the circle. So therefore, when we began it and we reached out to our own friends and families and things like that, the very first day, everybody was there.
Right.
That's great.
Right. Reverend Michael.
And nothing has wavered.
You started out, you said, as an agnostic, then you had inner experiences and you developed a faith, a belief, a presence. What do you say to people who are agnostic, who don't have that faith, that don't have that belief, that don't have the experiences you had? How do you do you inspire those people? And also, do you ever have any doubts yourself?
I have no doubt. I have zero doubt. The encounters that I've had over the past 30-something years have left no doubt in my awareness about a presence that's not an absence.
Right.
Now, generally, we do have atheists that come to Agape, interestingly enough, and where we meet are on life-enhancing values. I remember one time doing a memorial service. There was a gentleman in our choir who's Jewish, whose mother was a part of the union and a union organizer and an avowed atheist.
Sounds like my mom.
Yeah. And when I met the brothers in my office, they got into a kind of an argument because the other brothers were like, our mother was an atheist and she was a devout union person. She doesn't want to be having a memorial service at a church. And David was saying, no, Mom used to come to Agape. And they said, "What are you talking about? Mom never would come to a church." But she would come to Agape like a couple of times a month. And anyway, at the end of that conversation, what I had them all agree upon was that their mother believed in life-enhancing values, values such as love, such as peace, beauty, harmony, order, intelligence. Now, from a spiritual point of view, these are attributes of God. And so take the God word out, we met where values were. They could not disagree that peace was a value, that love is a value, that compassion, kindness, these are all values. So as atheists, they were able to embrace these particular values, and that's what I spoke to at the memorial service. And so if I do get into conversations with people that don't want to believe in a God, I generally say, well, I don't believe in the God you don't believe in either.
Right.
I don't believe in that God either. I don't believe in an anthropomorphic man doling out blessings and sending people to hell. I believe in a presence that is that emanates a love, a beauty, an intelligence, a life itself. So I generally go there.
That's great. Michael, tell us what the trans-denominational aspect. Where did that word come from? And it's a word I've always liked, and I don't know if you coined it, but I'd love to give you credit for it.
I started using it when I first began Agape. Trans means beyond, to go beyond. And denomination, are the different fragments of different kinds of religion. They have different kinds of denominations in Christianity, Buddhism, etc. So this is a trans-denominational community, which means we go beyond denomination into whatever is true, whatever is authentic, whatever is real. So in many spiritual churches, there are denominations, and those denominations fragment. They separate people. And so we go beyond denomination, and we're always on an exploration into whatever is true, and we gain that through practice of meditation, and we have insights into what's real. And then that becomes a part of our canon, becomes a part of our practice. So since we're cutting across or going beyond denomination, we have people of all ilk that come here that want the truth, but they don't want it filtered through a denomination. And we also teach that each individual is to have their own encounter with the presence. You have to have your own personal revelation. You can't live off of my revelation. You can be inspired by what I say, but my inspiration is to encourage you to practice so you have your own encounter, your own revelation, your own transformation.
Very good.
So now that the word's pretty popular, and people have taken that on. I can remember in the religious science movement, I was the first one to take the word church off and call it community. Say we're a spiritual community because, there are Buddhists that come. There are individuals that are of the that practice Islam. People that go to synagogue, and spiritual community embraces everyone. And so now, again, that's popular. Now, in that particular movement, they call them spiritual centers.
Right.
You know what I mean? Right. But when I first did that, they crucified me. I was like called all kinds of names. He's taking the name church off. And what's he doing? And now, I was leading the pack.
Well, you're in good company among the crucified.
Right. Reverend Michael, what do you mean by life visioning? What exactly is that?
Well, life visioning is a spiritual technology that allows you to become available to what's trying to emerge from your soul or your spirit. The next step of your evolution. What's being held in you in the mind of God. Just as let's say an acorn has within it the information to become an oak tree. Within us, as a spiritual being having a human incarnation, we have something loaded and coded already within us. It doesn't come from the world. It doesn't come from our parents. It doesn't come from society. It's already there. Life visioning helps us become receptive to that. So like in the beginning stages of metaphysics, the training wheels is visualization, You learn that you can visualize something and see it and have it a feeling, a tone about it, and help manifest. That's the beginning stages. The more the advanced stage is visioning, where instead of telling the law what you want, you actually open yourself up and ask questions that begins to cultivate your spiritual faculties, so you hear what's within you that wants to come out. So visualization would be masculine, visioning would be more feminine, it'd be more yielding, allowing, surrender. Whereas visualization is more Nike, just do it. This is what I see, this is what I want, I'm going to make it happen, you see. So visualization is making it happen with your mind. Visioning is making it welcome because it's already here. You just don't see it yet.
Very good. We should tell our listeners that Life Visioning is the title of Reverend Beckwith's latest book and CD set, and I'm sure you can find out information about that online.
Right, they can get it from the bookstore. They can go to Sounds True and get it at Amazon. I was on Oprah recently, and she really was reading from it as she was interviewing me, and of course the book sold out on Amazon.
Well, that does happen.
But it's back in print now. They can get it now.
Very good. One of the things that I know about Agape is you have a lot of outreach, and you have every year you're involved with something called the Gandhi King Season of Nonviolence. And so it's not a passive spirituality, and it sounds like you probably have somehow, enjoined your early civil rights revolutionary activism with your inner work and your spirituality. Can you talk a little bit about that intersection of the inner and the outer, and especially these days? We're now 4 months into the Donald Trump era, and
it seems like 4 years. I know, and you're absolutely correct. It was a nice blending of the activism that I had as a young man, teenager. Even, we would picket stores that were not giving a fair deal to minorities. As a teenager, that's what I did. I was the founder of the Harriet Tubman Prison Committee in Atlanta, Georgia, in which we were fighting for prisoners' rights to not be slaves, to get a wage for the work they were doing. So when I started Agape, what emerged out of that and what's here now, we have a prison ministry, we have a feeding program, we have a Sacred Service Saturday event, we have programs that deal with the families of those who are incarcerated as well, and we go into the prisons and do teachings and inspiration. The Gandhi King Season for Nonviolence, I think we were in our 20th year of that. That emerged. At the time, it was the 50th memorial anniversary of Gandhi's assassination date, which was January 30th, and the 30th memorial assassination date of Dr. King, and that was April the 4th. So we decided to create a 64-day program in which people would be taught these tenets of nonviolence, ahimsa, forgiveness, and now it's gone to many, many, many countries, as well as the United States, and it's gone into a curriculum and school systems where people are teaching these principles: mediation, compassion, forgiveness, mindfulness. There's been many programs all around the United States. I can remember about 3 or 4 years ago, there was some violence that was happening in Chicago, and it was during the season for nonviolence, and the texts and the emails went out, and within an hour, there were hundreds of people there holding prayer vigil as a witness to the peace and stopping the violence that was going on there with the police and that type of thing. So that is the Association for Global New Thought convenes that. I'm the president of that particular organization. And we convened that, and Arun Gandhi was one of the national chairpersons as well. And again, as you said, it's a nice combination of not just passively navel gazing, but definitely having a focus of realizing our oneness with the presence. But with every insight that one has, it does follow there's an action after that. There's some way that we behave differently, we act differently. As I teach, vision without action is a fantasy, and action without vision is chaos.
Mm-hmm.
So once you have a vision and once you start to have insights into your spiritual nature, it's going to lead you to some kind of action. Everyone has a gift. Everyone has a giftedness. And so you're going to end up finding your gift that you're supposed to give in the world and give it. And so it's definitely not passive.
Right.
I say it's reverential.
Reverend Michael, thank you so very much for your time today. And maybe in closing, any advice or any words you have for folks out there, especially anybody that's feeling in their life some hopelessness? Why should they have hope? What can they do to get out of that feeling?
Well, first of all, what I know for sure is that life always wins.
Mm-hmm.
And if an individual is hopeless, depending on, many people flooded into the community after the election. They were very bereft about what had happened. Many people have different levels of hopelessness. What I know for sure that there's a life present within us that's untouched and untarnished by time or history, or even our past experience. And when we have a modicum of spiritual practice, we begin to get in touch with that part that's not locked in time. It begins to be the activity of our awareness, and it leads and guides us into right action. And I've seen regeneration of body temples, mental bodies, emotional bodies, relationships, financial bodies, from this when people get in contact with this presence. And so there are individuals who are very forlorn about what's happening at the White House. And I say that, 45 is an evolutionary trigger, that's basically revealing all the stuff we have to work on in the psyche of humanity. There's been more overt anti-Semitism and racism, and since he's been in office in a long time, because people feel emboldened to do these kind of things because he's in office. Yet it was hidden before. Now it's coming to light, so it can actually be dealt with. He's also brought the peace movements who hadn't talked to each other in years. They're now meeting again. So he's actually built a very large peace movement in the United States that is starting to become very viable and strategic. So I think it's all a part of progress, One of the things I mentioned on Sunday was that, after he bombed Syria to stop them from bombing Syria without congressional consent, I said to him, appreciate that you're appreciating the children of Syria that are being scalded by these chemicals. You won't let them into our country, but you're appreciating them. But we also have kids that are being poisoned in our own country, right there in Flint, Michigan. But water, they still don't have water there. And I said, I challenge you to take the same kind of enthusiasm, go into Flint with your army of engineers, take care of the mayor and the governor there that's done nothing. They were very criminal in their behavior, and build new pipes there so these people are going to have some water to stop poisoning our own children, So I speak at different levels. I speak to our mysticism. I speak to the metaphysical principles. And I also try to translate that into what's going on in the world,
Very good. Speaking of you speaking, people, as Dennis said when we started, all over the country are aware of your extraordinary speaking ability. And I just want to encourage people. I have to tell you this. The first time I heard your name, someone told me about Agape sometime in the 90s. And the person said, "You got to hear Reverend Beckwith. He's the James Brown of spirituality." and I said, "Okay, I'll go to that." But people, even if you're not in LA, you can watch Agape live streaming.
Yeah, agapelive.com.
And then we're in LA. For anybody going to LA, where and when?
We're headquarters in Los Angeles. We're in Culver City proper.
Mm-hmm.
So if they go to agapelive.com, they'll get the address at 5700 Buckingham Parkway, Culver City, 90230. And people make this a destination point. We have
Great.
3 services. I have a way of meditation service that begins at 6:30 a.m., and then we have another service that begins at 8:30 and another service that begins at 11. And then we have a Wednesday evening service as well, 6:45 meditation, 7:15 service, and we have a Sunday evening service. So thousands of people come through here during the week, and we have a large viewership around the world. People watch it live, or they go onto the archives and watch it, and it's very large and growing.
We'll
Thanks for taking the time.
Thank you so very much, Reverend Michael. Absolute pleasure having you on, and we look forward in the future to having you back. Reverend Michael Bernard Beckwith, thank you so very much.
It's my joy being with you both, and continue to have a bright and magnificent day. Thank you for the good work you guys are doing.
Okay. Keep up the good work to yourself.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.